welcome everybody to episode 19 with the Fall Line with KS and Company. And Dave Capron, and I'm here with Angelo Ross. Angelo's on the road down there, man. You went down to Liberty?
I'm at Liberty.
At Liberty in his hotel room.
Yeah, you should see the chair. You should see the chair in this hotel room.
The chair. I did see the back foot when you moved. You got to go sideways, twirling that thing.
Oh my God. Dude,
look at that. We need those.
Look at those metal bars coming out of the back. I don't even know what those are for. They're like shock absorbers for your neck.
We're going to have to get those. We're going to have to find out where they are. Those are going to be our official podcast chairs, man. We're going to have to get a couple of them.
I got to tell you, dude, it's not that comfortable. Like I looked at it.
Okay.
The first thing I thought when I looked at it, I'm like, oh my God, we sit too much. And then I didn't want to sit in it because I thought it was going to be so comfortable that I wouldn't want it out. But like I'm leaning forward because the thing's making my back hurt.
Don't Margie will tell you get the hell out of that chair then. So we ain't getting out. We got to get some cool podcast chairs though. And it can't be just, it'd be too, kind of to have it like ski chairs, like Adirondack ski chairs. We need something comfy.
I got my bouncing ball at home. I sit on it.
Well, how are we going to do it when we do like a summer one? We're going to have the outside.
Bouncy beach ball. And just do it.
I got to figure out how I can transmit from down at the pool or something. Yeah. But all right, let's get to the podcast. Everybody's probably going, what are you going to talk about tonight? What we're going to talk about tonight is a little offshoot of the last podcast. We talked a little bit, we were looking at the starting points, and Angelo, you brought up the whirly birds, and I don't know, I think we had mentioned hockey stop once or something, but we kind of focused on whirly birds and things of that nature, to some activities that we can get people to start and get them moving. And I don't know, just thinking over the week and talking from people and getting some feedback, I wanted to back us up. I wanted us to back up the level, because I'm probably not going to expect my a Learn To class or somebody coming to the sport the first time that their starting activity would be whirly birds. We could do that, but that would probably be something that would have to go on the Warren Miller type video, having them watching a group of Learn Tos doing whirly birds. But there's some starting points I know that I think are wicked basic that I'm going to put out there that I hope people think a little more about. And some of them are right in our exam guide. They're in there of just, the traverse. You've mentioned the traverse. We've talked about that in our previous podcast. And I think people think it's just a useless, you go across the hill, they traverse, they can go from one side of the slope to the other. But I mean, for me, I think people are missing the point that the traverse is there for people to start to understand the ski and how the ski can grip the snow so that they can get across the snow. But when is the ski slipping? When is the ski gripping? Some people, you say, hey, let's go over there, and they can get over there. They kind of lean to the inside, whether it's they kind of lean way over with their shoulders or tip in with the legs. Most of them tip in with everything. But some like slip sideways, almost like as they start to push forward, they're ending up 5 feet down the hill, 1 foot across. Mm-hmm. And then the coaching comes in. How do we get them to put that ski up on its side? And, maybe it comes even before that. I mean, how many people are really focusing today on the herringbone and sidestep as activities, not just to climb, but activities to promote future movement and skills? Mm-hmm. In a herringbone, if they're able to do the herringbone effectively, they're starting to do some movements that are very similar to what's going to be a skate. To roll the ski over to the edge and then move away from that to step up to the other foot, that ankle and knee angulation, that ability for the femur to work in the hip socket. And it's not going to be as fancy as when the coach does the instructor, but I think they need to do more of that, because those to me are some of the low end things of starting those activities. Because I got to tell you, it's when people can climb real well, they start getting happy because they can move around. Mm-hmm. When you take a step uphill and slide 4 feet back, a step uphill and 4 feet back, people get frustrated. Mm-hmm. And I think there can be great success there. And I don't think we're doing enough there as a group.
No, I agree with that. How many times do you drop something? You gotta, your pole, you gotta go back for it. The one that I always think about is that like backwards herringbone that you have to do in the lift line when you're gabbing and you get your tips on the wrong side of something, and feel like everybody in lift lines looking at you, and you got to get on the other side of this post or whatever. And New skiers, I think, probably feel that every run. Like, the ability for them to be like mobile, like purposefully, and be able to move up the hill, down the hill in some, or using some tactic like a herringbone is really valuable. I mean, but then beyond that, like what you're saying is it relates to something a little more high end, like skating, for example.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they don't realize they can lay the groundwork for things. I had a great group today. We were out skiing in spring conditions, and it was a little wet. Rain was coming down. Thank God for the Gore-Tex. And I did stuff where I had them going across the hill and stepping up. They were doing a sidestep in a traverse, and some struggle with it. These were good skiers, and it's like, they were doing interesting things. Some were, they had their downhill leg just really straight. So then they're putting their other foot up the hill, and this is nothing to step up, instead of having some flex. And then as they stepped the foot up to lengthen the other leg to start moving in. And then we took it to trying to do like just a traverse and then like 1,000 step up the hill. So you're taking a diverging step. Mm-hmm. And some had a hard time climbing the hill. Had a hard time to have their travel go up. They were pushing off versus trying to move, and they're pushing the ski away. They're trying to push on it and the ski would break away. And it's like, think about moving, keep the ski on grip and move your body, lengthen that leg to move your pelvis up the hill. And that's very similar to moving the inside of the arc. That can start right at Learn too. And those activities of sidestep, herringbone, those are key elements that I think need to be refocused. And, you can play with that a lot more. And it's not like they have to go climb people for 4,000 miles, but I think we're relying on the magic carpet, the belt, the snow belts, all those surface lifts for these beginners to just throw them on there up and down, up and down. Mm-hmm. And then they wonder why they can't put the ski on grip coming down. They can't tip the ski coming down the hill. Crab walk's another one. I think the crab walk needs to be revisited. It's right in our exam guide.
It's such a good step between straight run and wedge turn. It's not technically a turn. There's no rotary to speak of. It's a direction change, but man, it's so useful. And it's one of those things that we do 100 times a day without thinking about it. Back to the lift corral, getting in the lift corral. If you're off target, you're off target and you sort of straighten that one leg and bend the other and you shimmy over to get into the corral. If you don't know that exists, like as a beginner skier, as a new skier, your chance of like landing on that accidentally, if you've never been shown that or practiced it, is pretty slim, I think, super valuable.
Yeah, it's just, it kind of came to me to talk about this again because I heard it this week from my staff. And, I asked you this question already earlier this week. I think I texted it to you. And it just baffles me. There's kind of this thought process of people get in trouble. They're doing certain things on skis and like the wedge, like they're doing a wedge. And some of my staff don't want to do a wedge, which is fine. But then they're like, we should outlaw it. No more wedge. Completely outlawed. You can't do the wedge. They should only be able to.
On the record, I love a wedge. I love it.
I know. I'm with you on that. Yeah. So the wording comes, they have to unlearn the wedge.
Yeah.
They have to unlearn the wedge. And I can't fathom it because I don't know how I'm going to unlearn something. I can learn something else, learn a different pathway, learn a different skill, but I can't unlearn it.
Yeah. Agreed. Physiologically, I'm not a brain doctor. I'm not a brain expert, but the way I understand it works, like when you learn something, you make connections between neurons, between and among brain cells, and like they don't disappear. You can overlay them with new experience, but you don't, they're always there. You don't unlearn them, but like with the wedge thing that I accidentally looked at Facebook this week and then I regretted it because there's this huge war going on and on this one post about it's like to wedge or not to wedge. And one was like wedge versus snowplow. And then it sort of devolved into something about open parallel. And a guy asked me today, he's like, which camp are you in? I was like, I'm in all the camps. I love all this. Like, wedging is something we do. We all do it. To outlaw it or, that unteach it, not teach it, I just don't think that's practical because it's something we all do. But if you look at if you look at wedging, not necessarily beginner wedge turns, if you look at the process of like putting your skis in that configuration at the other end of the spectrum, not green terrain, but look at the most difficult black terrain, or like you mentioned a little bit ago when we were chatting before about it, you're in the trees.
Yeah.
And you need to put your skis in that configuration to get into a steep chute or to get around a tree to start your descent. If you don't have that in your repertoire, it's something I want to have in my repertoire. You know what I mean? It's super valuable. And then really one of my favorite things in bumps is a step turn or a step Christie or a stem Christie, whatever you want to call it. But you're pushing a ski out there, using it, speed control, direction change, the whole thing. Those are all, in my mind, in the wedge family.
Yeah.
I love a wedge.
Yeah. I mean, I had a gentleman this week that was struggling with like exactly what I hear the crews complain about. And it's not just the home hill. We hear it when we're doing events, when we're talking, especially in level 1 stuff or people getting ready for level 2 and a level 2 prep, that, people get caught on the inside edge of the inside ski. And yeah, they do at times. I mean, this gentleman I was working with yesterday was struggling. I mean, he would literally crank his outside ski and just rotate that foot that he literally was making a T. His new outside foot in that power wedge would come around the corner and his boot would be down by the tip of his inside ski. And yeah, that leg was straight as could be. He's on that inside edge. That thing wouldn't turn. I mean, he was twisting every ounce and it was locked up on such a high edge. But I didn't think about having him unlearn that. I went right to a modified, I started working him across the hill and did like a crab walk, garland type thing. It wasn't the full garland. It wasn't the full crab walk. I was just trying to get him to rock off the edge and back on the edge in somewhat of a traverse type situation, just to let the ski smear, let it go. Because I wanted him to start to figure out how to release that inside ski to roll that over to tip it. And then we had to work some things with, some little pedaling, or I had him stepping a little bit, trying to get the joints, because that inside leg's those joints are going to have to bend for it to get shorter. Because it was straight, man. It was, I don't know if I could get my leg that straight in my ski boot, but I mean, he had it.
You didn't give him a Matt Boyd lesson. You didn't give him the Matt Boyd. Hey, don't do that.
Yeah, I didn't whack him behind the knee with the pole or anything.
That's all you do. Yeah, don't do that.
Hey, what are you doing? Don't do that. But, and it took him a while, and we had to get a couple other things. And within the hour, it wasn't completely gone, but he was skiing down stuff and he was smiling. He's going, wow, this is a lot easier. But I never told him not to do something. I just explained to him what was happening and what we had to add to his skiing. And there was no way this gentleman, unless I took him to the snow belt, was going to do parallel turns, because he wouldn't have any speed control. He didn't have that kind of skill level. And even on the belt, down when you're on the flattest, our little beginner snow belt where the first turns are made. I mean, it's funny when we want to do, everyone's saying no wedge. And I can take anybody over there, even some of the gold pins, and say, all right, I want you to go from the top to the bottom and make parallel turns. No wedge, no convergence, no divergence. Keep your skis parallel. Mm. And no one can do it because you're moving so slow, and the accuracy and precision that needs to happen is very difficult. They all tend to have a little bit of convergence, a little smidgen of wedge in that top when they start to turn those skis.
I love a little bit of convergence.
Yeah, but think of the speed we're going at on the snow belt. Yeah. Most of the students are going at that speed to move inside of both skis, to be on corresponding edges and to have yourself on the downhill side just a little bit with that belly button. There's not a lot of momentum to hold you up. You have to move far, but then you're only moving a little ways. Mm-hmm. So naturally you see a little bit of that kind of sneaking that downhill ski down the hill to have something to stand on.
Right.
And so it's not, I mean, as long as they don't complain about that and they want to have them steer both feet and don't talk about the wedge, but people are going to make it. I mean, as much as a lot of folks say, I'm not going to teach them a wedge, I'm not going to have them do a wedge, 99 out of 100 students are going to make a wedge coming down the hill when they're turning.
But again, just back to like what you just said about sticking that downhill ski down there to have a little something to stand on.
Yeah.
That's absolutely vital when you're coming into a shoot.
Yeah.
You know, or like at home, the bumps get icy and sometimes you have to step and like you have to get past the first 2 or so bumps to get to the actual skiable because like a lot of people like sidestep those first couple of bumps and it's like a mirror up there and you have to do some things to get there. Brace against the ski, step over something, all that stuff is useful, you know.
It's just, it even, and I love that when we're in that little crab walk thing and we don't do a real slam on the outside ski to really get it arcing hard, but just get the other one to smear a little bit to get it to skid. Because, I mean, that's starting now. You can almost have that be some of your speed control. As the ski smearing and scraping across the snow, that inside ski. And, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And, I think that's the thing. It's so much of all or nothing instead of a lot of play and a little bit of different things. Cause I mean, you get to the steep terrain and it can't just be railroad tracks.
No,
I mean, if you're, Bodie Miller or, Matt Boyd, maybe it can be just railroad tracks, but, I'm going to butter it a little bit.
There's a whole separate piece of this that just, I'm going to insert a little episode of What's Bugging Angelo into this.
There we go.
I'm going to embed it in this episode. There's a whole piece of the conversation nobody's having, and that's style. Nobody talks about style, and expressing yourself, because this is an art. It's as much art as sport, right? And nobody's having that conversation, but all of those movements that you can, like the more movements you can make purposefully, the more you can put your stamp on what your ski run or your snowboard run looks like. Yeah. And, like I was watching a video this morning. I came across this video of Seth Morrison just killing this run, and it just has such good style. It looks good. And it looks different from like Glenn Plake was the next video that came on. They look different when they ski, but I don't hear any of that conversation. Like, what do I want to look like? It's like everybody's trying to fit some mold and do it right. Yeah. But not getting to that point of autonomy where they say, okay, I understand the basics and I've mastered the basics of this, and now I'm going to put my flair on it. Like Ron Kipp talks about redundant degrees of freedom. But remember, he came to training a couple of years ago and he's talking about, I forget how many possible combinations of movements you have based on the number of joints in your body. But say it's like 1,200, whatever it is. Yeah. But like, you can move your wrist and not impact the performance of your skis. You can throw some pizzazz into your run and do this as a stylish, artistic / athletic endeavor if you have access to all these movements. Yeah. And if you're feeling, flamboyant someday and you want to come down the hill with your arms over your head and you're doing exactly what you intend to do with your skis, I think that's awesome. And I just don't hear a lot about that style conversation. But in order to be an artist on these, to slide on these sticks and be an artist, you have to have access to all the movements, all the motion.
Yeah. I think, and that's where I go back to that to learn too, because it's like I want people to have more options. I mean, I want them to have options. Like today, I was skiing with some good skiers. I had some level 2s. I had a level 3. Good skiers. These are not people aspiring, just had their level 1 and going for level 2. They're skiing pretty well. But I did some things just trying to play with the tactics of how much edge we used and how much edge we used on different pitch, on different steepness. And they didn't like at first that I wanted them to use as little edge as possible, but to still continue to have some shape so that it was still round the turn and they were able to direct where they were going. So it wasn't like we were on flat skis and just, doing pivot slips down the hill. But how much edge did you need to get the job done at a certain speed? And some of that was just to get them to a lower edge angle so they could feel some more of the roll of the feet and the boots, versus the big upper body and pelvis move back further. I wanted to move things low. But it was hard because they didn't want to change. They had in their mindset that, we're going for more edge. We want grip. We want to slice. We want to arc. And I was trying to get it the other way so that when we went to some steep terrain, that we were going to try the same thing we did. And it kind of was blowing their mind at first. I was like, hey, let's do some open parallel, some basic parallel on this black diamond terrain, some steep stuff. And they didn't know what I meant, which is usual, when I throw something out like that. And I'm like, think about that. You're making the open parallel speed. You're thinking about your ski working in the snow that way. You're going to have higher edge angles than we would on some blue terrain or some green terrain doing some open parallel. But I want you to have that mentality of speed. I want you to have that mentality of how much grip you're using. Let the ski slip a little bit around the whole arc. Keep the shape and keep the speed down. And they started doing it and they're like, we're not skiing that well. And they're watching each other. But when they watch somebody, they go, they're skiing really well because they were starting to use the ski the whole turn and not just leveling it onto a huge edge and then ripping it across the bottom and trying to check the bottom of the turn, everything abrupt. I mean, they had to shape the whole turn. They had to steer and guide. And then we just upped the intensity. But it's that thing you're saying that the art, the creativity, what comes to mind is, Eric talked about it. Eric Lipton talked about the grace. I mean, it was neat. He said, when we asked him what he looks at in good skiing, what to him, and he said, somebody skis with grace, that has a touch to the snow, has the ability to do different things, that it looks playful when they're coming down the hill. And I think somebody that goes to steep terrain and can rip some arc and turns is awesome. But then to watch somebody come down that like it's nothing, like it's flat, that things are round, they're using the ski design, but it's not like wicked arcing turns. I mean, it takes some talent. And then those are really, today was easy. We had grip up the kazoo, raining out, great spring snow. But tomorrow, if the lifts run with the wind, it's going to be boilerplate. We're going from 45 to 5 tonight. So there's no way that that on any of the tough terrain, I'm going to just arc them up on side and let her roll, man. There's going to be some scraping. I'm going to want that ski to smear, and it won't be smearing. It's going to be hurting my ears. It's going to be so loud. And I think that is, that's, I think where you were going earlier when we started talking about, what you and I like in good skiing. You want that art, you want the creativity. And I think that comes with, you've got to try different things, not just in how you move, but the speed, the timing, the intensity. And if you want to have better success, I'm going to say it tonight, you want to have success and have an easier time to find that success at level 2 and level 3 in our skiing exams for PSA, you need to search that out. I truly believe that. If our members would start searching out different ways of edging the ski in terms of the rate, the timing, how fast, how much they smeared, how much they skidded at different parts. Did some stivets. They also did some more railroad track stuff. Railroad track's slow, so they're working in the boot. And that to me is a wicked challenge. You look at the whirly bird. I love taking a group and saying, let's do some railroad tracks, but on wicked flat terrain, so slow that if you move your belly button left or right, you fall over. You need to move just down low in the boots and legs. That's that to me. That's a, and then do it on one foot,
and then switch,
and then do it switch. Then we'll do it switch. Yeah, then do it switch. I mean, because but those. I mean, that's where I find the touch in the boot for me. The railroad track's slow, not railroad tracks fast. Railroad tracks fast or easy, but you do railroad tracks at a very slow speed. You've got to be very accurate. And I feel it right down on the bottoms of the feet and that little toe side. Going fast, it's like, yeah, I can balance against the momentum, but to really do it well, I need to go slow and dial that up.
I think, I'm picturing this this hill at home that's a beginner run, but it's a little bit crooked toward the tree line.
Yeah.
And I watch a lot of brand new skiers who are up there, and they don't know how to edge yet, and their skis are flat, so they're a victim to that ski. Like as they drift closer and closer to the tree line, you know what I mean? They're getting pulled down gravity because they don't know how to edge. They're a victim of their flat ski. But I think the other end of that is true too. And if you're on too high of an edge angle, you become a victim of that ski. If it's on too high of an edge angle for what you need for the situation, you can't. It's in your way. It's a limiting factor, and you have to get it out of your way somehow. You know, it's a deficit. But I think for a lot of reasons, I think we're biased toward the horizontal aspect of the ski, like edge to edge. We only really think in those terms.
Right.
But you said a minute ago, ski design, and there's a lengthwise design to the ski that you can use too. And you know, I hear a lot of language about pressing into the tongue of the boot and, you know, driving into the tongue of the boot, and that's a very active way to get that joint to close. But once it's closed, if you're pressing it closed, you're limited. You can't move. Like that's it. You've reached the range of motion. But that ski is designed for you to come through the bottom of the turn. If you come through a little more relaxed and allow the shape of the turn and the terrain to bend the front of the ski up towards your nose, that'll close your ankle joint too. Only it's a lot more passive. You're not using as much energy to do it. And so you have access to more range of motion. But like, yeah, to your point, it's about understanding these aspects of ski design, but having access to all those motions. Can you put it on a high edge? That's great. But can you also be purposeful with it when it's flat?
Yeah.
Awesome. But do you know how to use the tip? Can you allow the tip to bend and use that energy to put your body somewhere, to direct your turn somewhere because you're using that aspect? Or you could say the same for the tail, you know. But any movements we do on skis, wedges and stepping and shuffling and hopping and all these things that we do, I think give you access to those movements. They're all valuable. There's value in all of them at some point.
It's like the one-footed hop, the 1 foot, what was it? 1-footed 1,000 steps.
I don't even know.
You done that one?
Hell no, I'm not doing that.
You can ask Brian Nuss. We did 1-footed 1,000 steps. But we did it down at Elk. He talked about it in one of his blogs on Facebook.
1-footed 1,000 steps. Is that twice as many steps as if you do 2-footed 1,000 steps, or half as many? I can't even picture.
Get on 1 foot, and then you gotta. It's the hop around the turn, but you gotta hop on 1 foot. So you gotta hop on the 1 foot, 1-footed 1,000 steps.
How old I am? I'm not doing that.
then Troy gets pretty creative. A couple of years ago, we were going to do hop 1,000-step pivot slips all in one task.
Hop
1,000-step pivots. So we're doing hop turn pivot slips. So you had to slip a little bit when you landed. Instead of landing on the edge set, you had to land and slip a little bit. And then when you took back off again, in the air was the 1,000 steps as you're coming around. Oh man. Or you can do 1-footed pivot slips.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm not good at those, man. I can do 1-footed whirlybird, but Troy can do that 1-footed pivot slip. He'll do it. And after he does it, I just shake my head and ski away. I won't even try it because he does it and kills it. I was standing there. It was like 2 years ago. I can't remember. Kathy Brennan and I were together, which we must have been training somewhere. And Troy pulls that out. And I looked at her. She looked at me. I just shook my head. I just skied away. I'm like, no way am I trying that. I mean, I've tried it, but I wasn't trying it right then because I was going to be nowhere close, man.
Try it when you're in your backyard when nobody can see you.
Yeah, I got to go home and practice a little bit more. But those are the things that challenge. I mean, like a 1 foot. I was doing it with the kids the other day, because you did the whirly birds. So I went out and I had a few of the crew. We were doing some whirly birds, and I said, all right, let's do some 1 foot. We had 4 kids out the other day doing a semi-private, and I said, all right, now, and they were doing that, and they were having a little difficulty. They had the wedge when they came around. They weren't able to change edges to be able to keep the slip going and move fore aft, and we were working on that. And then they wanted something challenging. They felt like they were doing it. I said, all right, you think you're good at that? Let's do a 1 footed.
I was pretty pleased that after that episode, one of the instructors at home had listened to it and came over and said, I'm not very good at these and I'm going to practice them. And I said, go ahead and I'll come find you. And I went up and found her later, and she's doing these whirly birds and she's practicing them, and she was having some trouble. So I'm watching her, and then she skied over to me and stopped. And as she was talking to me, she did the cool ski instructor lean on your poles, you know what I mean? And I noticed these like lumps coming out of the back of her lower cuffs of her pants. And I said, let me hike your pant legs up there. Let me see your boots. And, what we had discovered was that her boots were just too loose. Like so you
could put the fist behind her leg.
I got a bunch of my hand, like this much of my hand down to my knuckles in there, but we fixed that problem and the performance got better. So it wasn't directly related to her athleticism, but it was a moment of discovery, because it was like, oh, really? And like, yeah. And okay, great. Like, you just got new boots. Like, when they're buckled up well, that's a different thing, And so just anytime people go out and experiment and try and get feedback, I think is terrific.
And Murmur might love this, but it's okay to fail. If you're good at it the first try, find something else that you're bad at that you got to get good at. I mean, the things that you're not very good at are probably the things you should practice or try to get better at, because those are probably the deficiencies in your skiing. It's the same thing as I don't see a lot of people out there doing falling leafs. We were playing around with the falling leaf today. I mean, those are tasks that need to be revisited on a little bit more of yes, we need to do these. And have people focus on. I mean, everyone talks about, they think they're in order, and Mr. Shostak says no, they're not in order, and the team members say they're not. And this is Bob's really important thing. Everyone wants to put the controlling the center, the relationship of the center of mass over the base of support to as the first priority in all of the fundamentals, and wasn't meant to be the priority one. But if you want to play with a falling leaf, that's what you're focusing on, the center of mass over the base support, and your feet are moving back and forth under you in that falling leaf. And that's a great drill for that. But I think they might think that they'll try it. I know my staff says, well, people can't do it. Well, if they could do everything, then there's no reason to come ski with us. They come to us, and those things you find they can't do is the things we're supposed to work with them on to coach them, because that's what's going to make them be able to ski the bumps and be able to go ski on the day when it snows, 5 or 6 inches and they have to ski in it because it didn't get groomed.
Or somebody you're skiing with does a yard sale in front of you and you have to go collect their gear off the hill.
Yeah.
You falling leaf to grab the poles over here, the skis over there. And that's how you get to it. It's such a practical application of something like that,
I mean, it works straight to our fundamentals.
Right.
It's one of those activities that it's not just some drill. It actually works on things. I mean, and it's really cool to play with that and to do it at different rates and in a different lane, how big. Today was awesome with the weather today. There was nobody on the hill, man. We could ski a whole trail and there was no one there. And then when somebody would come, we were like mad, like, why are they on our trail? We were doing something.
Hill.
Yeah. Hey, we rented this for the day. Get the heck off of here.
There's another piece to this conversation that I also don't see people talking about. And we're having, it's a very technique centric conversation right now. And that thread I saw on Facebook, it was like 300 comments long. I didn't read them all, but no, I didn't. And this may be in there. I don't know, but I don't see anybody coming at this diversity from a coaching perspective, though, or a teaching perspective.
Right.
The more of these as a coach, the richer of a coach you are. Yeah. And the more practiced you are at them, when you see somebody struggle with something, the deeper your bag of tricks, because you understand all these things, that makes you a better teacher, and unorthodox or not, I don't really believe in unorthodox technique. Like any technique that we can do on a pair of skis at some point, someday, somewhere, if you do it long enough, is going to become the thing you need to do. That's not unorthodox. But if you want to call things unorthodox, that's fine. But at least know how to do them and be good at them, because at some point that's going to save you as a teacher, as a coach.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you said you didn't read through the 300 comments. It's like, because the comments are just trying to say, I'm right, you're wrong. This is better than that one, versus different ways to attack an issue, or different ways to look at how to learn something. And skiing has a lot of different, just look at the different skis we can get on, the different radiuses, the different lengths, our backcountry type skis. So I don't like the shouldn't do that, you should do this kind of thing. It's really back and forth versus like, hey, I've tried this worked for me in this situation, maybe give it a shot. It's kind of a real antagonistic, it seems to me, versus if it doesn't work for you, that's cool. But if it works for me, it doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong. If somebody's able to tip their skis, or able to turn their skis, or able to come down the hill and have fun, then that's cool. And then we can work from there. Like, what's their outcome? What's their goal? We heard that from all of our crew that's been in from the team, which is really neat. It's a real common theme from Matt and Jeb and Eric and from Michael and from Sue. And, I think if we look back even in Chris Erickson's, when he was with us, the things we talked about when we were kids, that, it's the common theme of it's not right and wrong. It's what you're thinking about in that situation. And it can work. And maybe it works in this one, not in that one, but it doesn't mean it's wrong.
All about application.
What's that?
It's all about application. And I'm thinking about martial arts. Like if you know anything about martial arts, you look at all the different forms and all the different styles, all the different schools, all the different techniques in martial arts. You learn all these techniques, years and years and years, and you can approach these things like, oh, well, is that a strike? Like, what if you think of it as a block? Well, what if somebody grabs you? How can you use that as a grapple? And all of a sudden, this one thing has 8 or 10 applications. And that's how skiing needs to be. That's how things work. You have here's the basic technique. Can you do it, first of all, and then you practice enough to master it. But then once you've mastered it, you can get creative with it. You can change it and make it your own. And if that's a big wedge, or if it's a railroad track turn, whatever. But yeah, I think you got to have access to all of them.
Yeah. Be playful, be creative. Because you're like that way from, skateboarding and all that stuff. The snowboard crew is just, super creative. I think the most creative thing I've seen with like the big air stuff, I can't remember. It was called it was last year. It was like during the X Games. They weren't going off the hit. They were going off the knuckle. Oh, what did they call it? But all the tricks were off the knuckle.
Oh, I watched some of that. Yeah. I saw something last night. I can't remember what it was. Going off the knuckle.
Yeah. I enjoyed that 1,000 times more than watching all the stuff going on. It was unbelievable, the creativity of what they could do.
Yeah. The hill just dropped away and they were doing, I couldn't believe the stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was, and it just, I was blown away when I watched. I think it was the end of last season. I saw the first time they were doing that. Well, the first time I'd seen it. But that's the creativity with the ski. Like, play around with how you're carving, play around with how you're skidding, play around with how much the ski goes sideways, how much you butter the top, arc the bottom. Can you butter the bottom and arc more of the middle? So that you can control your edge angle, can control your shaping. Like you said, because if you get to a point where you get so much edge, you can't pick up a foot or you can't move something, maybe you're not in a balanced place. Try something different. Because what's the definition of insanity? You just keep doing the same thing over and over, right? Get the same result, expect something different.
People have been listening to this podcast for 19
That's what I was going to say.
Expecting.
I was going to come back.
If it's not good after the 19th one, you're not gonna. It's not good.
I thought of the same thing when I was saying when your here comes Angelo, I'm gonna go. Yeah, there's gonna be about 5 of our buddies going right now. Yeah, you guys keep doing the same thing as podcast. It's still going downhill.
You're getting really good at being bad at this.
Well, that's why it's the fall, right? We're falling downhill. But hey, it's just. I hope people can maybe start talking a little more about skiing and what you're saying, the creativity part. How can you be creative with your intensity? How can you be creative with your foot to foot? How can you be creative with how you roll your feet from one side to the other rate? Mm-hmm. You have to go so fast to your new outside ski all the time. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't, what do you have to do to not do that?
I'm gonna give everybody I'm gonna give homework to everybody listening right now. Go on YouTube, search Glenn Plake. There's a 5-minute video of Glenn with Brenna Keller and AJ Oliver. And I think it was Outside Magazine that sponsored the little clip. And it's about, Glenn and then his involvement with the PSI. Go watch it. Go watch that dude play on his skis. Go watch him play. And then that's enough said.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cause he can do some stuff on the skis right in front of you. That's like, I'm not even going to put my body in that position. I'm going to kill myself. But he is amazing.
Flats.
Yeah. On the flat. Oh yeah. It's not on pitch. It's like, he was doing some stuff. He's like, hey Dave, try this. And I'm like, Glenn, no, I'm afraid I'm not going to get back up.
Yeah, that's homework. Everybody watch that. We'll talk about it on episode 20.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I just want everybody to think we're not saying right, wrong, or you're doing wrong. We think you need to explore more. And I hope we encourage you to do that and not to rule anything out, because boy, let me tell you, the real big example is those ice skaters that come in. My nephew, when he ice skated, that was one example. I didn't even attempt to teach him a wedge, but that dude could do a railroad track before you could hike up the hill on a pair of skis. It was absolutely amazing. So he brought some skills that, most of our folks don't, but it's situational, and don't rule anything out. But thanks for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's. We'll see Angelo. Maybe is it the same kind of thing? If we don't get any comments or anybody say anything to us, maybe they're not listening.
Turn the comments off and just talk.
I did not turn the comments off. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. This is the Fall Line with Chaos and Company.